Hey, PrimeTime goddesses. This is Juju here, and today I'm with the amazing Martina Barnes, and we're going to talk a little bit about PrimeTime pivoting. I know that there are a lot of you out there who are thinking about how to create a second half of life that really turns you on and that gives you a way to do what you love with whom you love. And Martina has actually achieved that. So, Martina, can you tell everybody here in the audience what you do today?
Yes, ma'am. I work with high achieving, high performing women who are rocking it in all areas of their lives, except for maybe one or two. And I step in and I help them achieve reliable personal power in every area of their lives.
Awesome. So that's not what you were doing a couple years ago, is it? What were you doing when we first met?
When we first met, I was still primarily a trauma recovery psychotherapist in private practice. And I had been in trauma recovery for over 20 years. And I was experiencing some fatigue around that.
Yeah.
You can imagine a very heavy field to be in.
Yeah.
Rewarding, demanding.
Yeah. And I think that's common with a lot of women in midlife, right? We achieve mastery in something, 20 years is a long time. And although we're really, really good at it, sometimes we're past it or kind of ready to let it go. And you were in a really interesting situation because not only did you have this amazing psychotherapy experience, but you also have incredible intuition. You can see your clients in the way a lot of people can't. Can you fill us in a little on that?
Yes. So I spent the first 10 years. So now we're into about 33 years of being in business, which dates me, but that's why I'm a primetime lady. So I began as a spiritual counselor. It's not something that I sought. I came from a medical family with an atheist background, and I began to realize that I had these abilities to know and see things about others that they had not told me. And so I developed those abilities. I learned how to get control over my intuitive abilities. And so for the first 10 years of my career, I spent those as an intuitive teacher and counselor and a mindfulness meditation teacher.
Okay.
That was all pre-therapy.
And so when we first met, there was this kind of big question mark for Martina, right? This idea that you wanted to move away from the trauma work, or at least partially at that time away from the trauma work, toward women, working exclusively with women and helping them with their intuition and, developing their skills around how to really rock it in every area of life. And so it allowed you to apply all this mastery that you had in a new way with an entirely new audience, right? And also, very interestingly, at an entirely different price point, charging in a completely different way. And when we first started to work together, that was, I think, challenging for you, if not even off-putting, to make that switch from therapy to coach. Can you talk a little bit about that, about that money issue and sort of where you came from and where we went?
Yes. And I can't speak for therapists trained in the younger generations, but in the generation that I was trained in, we were not taught marketing. We weren't taught how to market our services. We weren't really even taught how to set our fees, other than maybe doing some research in our town as to, well, what's the price that you might charge for therapy? Yeah. And then, of course, we had, in the beginning, I accepted health insurance. So that put a cap on how much money I could earn. And also in our code of ethics professionally, we're basically taught that we should modify our fees to accommodate a person's particular needs. And so for many great years of my career, I was essentially subsidizing my clientele. And there's nothing wrong with that, except one day I woke up and I thought, well, wait a second, what about, I don't have anybody subsidizing me, and what am I going to do for retirement? And I am working in one of the hardest professions that I know of in severe trauma recovery, and I'm being paid very little for it. And in fact, when we met, I had briefly considered a career in real estate investment, switching to a career in real estate investment, and I had a couple of opportunities, but it didn't speak to my heart and my passion. It didn't hold enough value for service, to be in service. So you were pivotable. You were not pivotable. You were instrumental in maybe you were pivotable. I heard you got pretty good dance moves, girl. You were instrumental in me seeing myself through a different lens. And I had so much respect for you as a businesswoman. I thought to myself, well, if Juju sees my value, maybe I could believe her. And I started meeting other women through you who also were coaches, and realized that it was a very different marketplace with a very different price point, and that I wasn't doing anything wrong charging more. But how I had been trained as a therapist, at first I thought I was.
And I think, I work with a number of therapists that have made that switch to coaching, all in different fields. And it's a really interesting client base because therapists understand the concept of models and a specific series of actions, or sort of a secret sauce or a special formula to get results. And while therapy, you're really working with people who have mental health issues or who are sick in some way, right? With coaching, especially the women that you're coaching, they're not really in a threat state or in a state of illness. They're looking to maximize. Yeah. And so there's this shift around getting results for a different group of people and a different kind of result. And the ethical issues, the ethical questions around money, it would seem that they would sort of naturally evaporate, but they don't. The money stories hang around. And so that very often is the first hurdle that I will work with women on, is the feelings that come around money and around charging at a different level, charging what you're worth.
That's exactly right. And I'm amused that I can so easily support a fellow coach in raising her rate.
Yes.
But I need her to turn around and support me when it's my turn to have the courage to increase my rates.
Mm-hmm. And so now I think another thing that's really ironic, you and I have talked about this. So you have a full slate now. You got to the point a couple of months ago where you said, I can't take any new clients. I'm full. And you recently told me that you have some doctors as clients. So that's real full circle, right? So going from helping people with their health to helping people who help people with their health, right? Like it's just a real turn for you.
Helping the helpers.
Helping the helpers, yeah.
Right? It's a wonderful feeling, because these really high achieving, high performing female physicians who are also typically married and also typically have young children are struggling with feelings of guilt in taking care of themselves, in setting boundaries.
Yes.
In fact, a physician came to me today and told me about a limit she set. She didn't want her father and her mother, who've been divorced, for 20 something years, to come at the same time at Christmas. And she had invited mom first, and dad kind of tried to add himself, and she said no, and she set a limit, and she felt guilty.
Yeah.
And I had to reassure her, no, you're not a bitch for taking care of yourself.
Right. Right. So so here, this pivot is so interesting, right? Because you've changed the way you spend your day. You've changed the way you apply your energy. You've changed whom you spend time with, but you're still operating out of the same mastery. So you didn't really start over. You just changed the way you operate. Yes?
That's right. And I remember saying to you that I didn't know how I was going to show up as a coach. I had this idea in my head that I had to somehow have, I don't know, some kind of miraculous shift inside of me. I was like, oh,
yeah.
show up differently. And you said, I don't want you to show up differently. I want you to show up exactly for who you are, because maybe coaching is new, but you've been doing your field in communications for decades. So you have mastery, and you were instrumental in helping me own my mastery, really owning my mastery. And I'm so grateful for that.
Yeah, that was a really beautiful transition to watch. And I think, as you know, when you were in your mid 50s when we met, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. And, you know, by the time we reach our late 40s, early 50s, women who've had careers we're in mastery. We've been doing what we're doing for 25, 30 years. And you don't even know what you know anymore, right? So this idea of how am I going to apply this to something new is a really exciting idea. And I think one of the things that we also share is we go through these transitions in midlife that affect the way we see ourselves and call us to, I think, question purpose, or maybe look for new purpose. And when you and I first met, your dad had just passed, yes, which is, you know, we're going through stuff with our parents in midlife. Will you talk to that a little bit?
Yes. So when you and I met, my father had passed, I believe it was a few months prior to that, although it could have been longer. It was a bit of a time warp. And my father came to live with me. He was a brain surgeon. He got Alzheimer's. I moved him from Texas into my home here in the mountains of North Carolina. And I cared for him for several years. And prior to that, I cared for my mother for 7 years. So basically, I had been in a caring position professionally, and then I was in a caregiving position for a decade of my life. And so I felt a sense of loss. Not just loss of my parents, but loss of direction in a way.
Yes.
And what is my identity if I'm not going to be caring for my parents? And there was a part of me that really felt like a part of me didn't care. I felt like I'm over the hill. What do I have to offer?
Yes.
At this point? And why don't I just spend the rest of my career doing what I'm familiar doing, even though I'm not excited about it, even though I'm not passionate about it? Because there was a part of me that felt like, just who really gives a crap? And through working with you, I realized how much I really gave a crap.
Yeah.
And that, you know, really our spirits are timeless.
Yes.
And I saw you in this position of leadership telling other women that they don't have to accept that bullshit from society saying you are over the hill. So I just started to embrace it and started to feel very excited. And then I thought to myself, look at Ruth Bader Ginsburg. You know, she like worked until she croaked. So
yep, she sure did.
Like, I'm still in my 50s. I have zero excuse not to be out there as a trailblazer for other women, giving women permission like you do to say, we're not going to accept what society says. We are in prime time. We are stars right now. We're masters, and we're going to change the world, kind of thing, right?
Yeah, and we are. And I think, you know, it's, I go through this transition with so many women, this idea of, you know, when we get to midlife, we've mothered lots of things, right? Like you even mothered your parents to a certain extent. We've cared for lots of people. We've cared for projects. We've cared for businesses and careers. And then all of a sudden we have these shifts, right? If we have kids, our kids start to move out. We have careers that are kind of maturing, and our parents are becoming ill. Very often we lose our parents in midlife. Our bodies start to shift, and we have these feelings of loss. And if we don't really get clear on what's the potential of what's on the other side of that, it's really easy to feel like the loss is a winding down, right? Like this is the end. And if you're 55, it can't be the end, because what are you going to do for the next 30 years?
Exactly.
So it's really a door to walk through. And I think we're so clear when we're young that we're walking through a door. Right? I'm going to turn 18 or 21, and then this is going to happen, and this is going to happen. And I'm going to create this amazing, all these goals I'm going to achieve. And then we achieve them all. We go through these transitions, and nobody talks about doing it a second time. And so watching you do that was really tremendous. And I'm going to make a shift here. I hope you're not uncomfortable with this, but you were also single when we first met. And I can remember that you told me that you liked the idea of being coupled, but you had accepted the fact that you might not ever be coupled again.
Yes. That's right.
But now you're in love.
That's true. Yes. Well, I had accepted it to the point that I just decided, well, if I'm going to be single, I'm just going to make the best of my life. I'm going to start spending a month every summer in a European city that's bicycle centric. I'm going to work from there. And I'm really happy and complete on my own. And yet I'm a very relational person, as you know.
Yeah.
And the deepest part of me wanted to be partnered. And yet I had met a lot of guys who really just didn't qualify.
Yeah. And we talked about them, right? Like we went through that.
That's right. Yes. And I remember, I think it was September 2019, I was in Denver, and you and I had a coaching session, and I said, I have this ex-boyfriend who's reached out to me again, who I've sent away several times because he's not healthy for me to be in relationship with. And because I have this tender little softy heart that struggles setting boundaries,
yes,
right, in certain circumstances, I was like, oh, well, you know, the poor guy's really struggling, and I can be his friend, and who cares if there's anything in it for me? And so there was a part of me still hanging on to the possibility of being with him, but I knew he wasn't healthy. And it was great because you took the steering wheel and you said, this is what you're going to do, and this is what you're going to say to him.
Yeah.
And you're going to say to him, this is the last time you and I are going to talk. That's exactly what I said to him. He was so stunned. He was so shocked. And I spent about an hour on the phone with him, and he thanked me profusely. He had never had a woman be so kind and conscientious in saying goodbye.
Goodbye.
Right?
Yeah. And I remember that conversation. And we had a series of conversations because you were so clear that it was something that you didn't want to do, to be with him, to open the door. And at the same time, there was a part of you that believed that you weren't going to be able to stop yourself.
That's right.
There was a story around that. And I think there was a story around this idea of, well, I've come this far. The chances are I'm not going to meet somebody. Right? Chances are it's not going to happen for me this way. And I think this same idea around the business in terms of back and forth of, well, this is where I'm at. Right? And I can tolerate it. right? I'm a professional. I've learned all these things. I can tolerate this, right? There were things about your life that you loved, but then you moved into this space where you're just turned on. You have a new business, you have a new relationship, and a beautiful new relationship, and just sort of a 90-degree turn into excitement and just feeling turned on.
That's so true. And I have to say that after I said my final goodbye to that man, it was within 2 months that George found me, that we found each other. And I have to say, and I would say to any women listening to this, that if you have a part that says, why bother? Why go for my dreams at this point in my life? I would say, tie that part up, put a gag on it, throw it in the closet.
Yeah, don't let her drive the car, right? There's no reason to give in and compromise. There's just not.
There isn't, because I'm having more fun in my professional life and making more money and feeling more fulfilled than at any other time in my professional life. So, and in my life in general, I think, oh my gosh, if anybody told me how good things were going to get at 50, I would have been looking forward to it. Now I'm looking at 60. It's like, oh my God, what's going to happen at 60? I'm going to be ruling the world in my own little corner.
Yes. And I say that to women all the time, this idea that we're sort of sold this bill of goods that the older we get, the less we're worth. Or the older we get, the worse it gets. And it's just not true. Like, that is not my experience, my lived experience at all. And I'm surrounded by women who also do not have that lived experience. But the choice not to have that experience is a very deliberate choice. Yeah. And there's some unwinding of those stories that we may or may not have told ourselves. We picked them up from other people who, for their own reasons, wanted us to believe these things, right? And I think generationally things are different now. We are presented with opportunities that generations before us weren't presented with, and you've seized them.
Well, and just to have the permission to seize them is so exciting. And it wasn't until my early 50s, mid 50s, that I started running sprint triathlons. I started doing sprint triathlons.
Yes.
And I had back surgery 10 years ago. I remember my massage therapist saying, you're going to have to accept that your muscles may never be as strong. You may never be athletic like you were before. And I said, hell no, I'm not going to accept that.
I'm not going to accept that. Yes.
No. And he was surprised. Because when I started training for these triathlons, I felt better and better. And it was such a feeling again of empowerment. So yes. As far as I'm concerned, we're meant as women to become bigger badasses the older we get.
I think so too. And this idea of, especially physically, and I've had discussions with my friends around this too. You start to kind of get these creaky things or these aches or whatever. And it's really easy to say, well, this is how it's going to be now. Right? This is how it's going to go. And you and I even have had a conversation about that recently. My mom had a chronic back pain and had a doctor, probably she was in her late 50s when it started, who didn't want to treat it. He wanted her to take pills. And she spent her, the last 25 years of her life on pain meds because nobody wanted to treat it. And I've just developed arthritis. And you said to me, there's no reason that you can't, treat that with lifestyle and get out and move different ways and, don't accept what happened to your mom. And that's a perfect example, sort of as a story that we see or that we understand that this is how it's going to go now, right? These are my genes. This is my heredity. Yeah. And my mom, she didn't have the choices that I have. It wasn't, nor did she have the power that I have. She had an entirely different set of circumstances. So let me ask you a question. If you could give women, PrimeTime women, women who are headed out of perimenopause toward menopause, right? Women in their 40s, 50s, say 3 pieces of advice, what would you tell them?
I would say call Juju.
I love number 1.
I would say unwind those stories. Don't believe everything you hear in your head.
Yeah, for sure.
And be courageous in loving yourself. Because society, it's not on the same page yet. So we have to love ourselves, and then we have to love and champion other women.
Yes.
And that brings such a beautiful, beautiful high quality of life. So those stories you hear in your head, don't believe them, challenge them.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing what I know are some intimate things around love and money and family and loss, and for giving this gift to other women who I know are out there who want to do the same thing. You're amazing.
Pleasure. As are you, my fearless leader.
Talk soon. Namaste, my friend.
Namaste.